Good morning, North America. We are less than 24 hours away from finding out who we play in the Swiss stage of Worlds 2023, at least for the first round, because we have one final set of best of fives that will determine the two teams that make it in. So this is your spoiler warning for all matches leading up to the two best of fives that are going to be happening tomorrow. In 3, 2, 1. The final two seeds will be taken by one of four teams, a inter-regional matchup between the top two VCS teams in Team Wales and GAM, as well as a matchup between the PCS and Europe in G2, Jesus, it is early in the morning, PDS versus PSG. Unironically, it's actually kind of like a European matchup because for those that don't know, even though PSG is like a PCS team, PSG themselves are like Paris Saint something, like it's a French team. So unironically, you do kind of have like a French matchup to a certain extent. The games from today, there's really not much to note. I'm actually going to touch on the results from today's game a little bit later because I want to do a whole segment on Loud today as they drop 2-0 to GAM, so they're not going to be continuing forward in the tournament, and that brings on a whole other conversation that we need to have. And then Flying Oysters were not able to take a game off of BDS despite Adam running it down a few times. So going into tomorrow, when we first look at the VCS rematch, the question is, what's these two teams' record against each other? And luckily, Reddit actually uncovered this literally 5 minutes after I spent time looking it up myself, but they provide a pretty damn good summary that Team Wales have never taken a series off of GAM. Team Wales dropped a series in the upper bracket, dropped down to lower, and then were winning Game 5 series pretty much the entire time until they got to finals, where they then proceeded to get 3-1. So when you look at this, realistically, you would favor GAM. However, if there's one thing that we've learned from LCS playoffs and from just Worlds and tournaments in general is that you don't really bet against the hot team that has proven themselves on a consistent basis. Upsets are one thing. If you see somebody, for example, like Loud pulling off the upset against GAM, we now have proof that, hey, that upset does not necessarily mean that they're going to be the better team, even if it wasn't a best of 3, which is more damning than a best of 1, which happened in prior years. So here, I'm actually going to go Team Wales. 3-2, why not? I mean, the problem with these matchups is that when you're playing against your own region, you know each other's styles. They've probably been sharing some scrim results between each other. So it's like any predictions that you're trying to make based on the World's tournament will give you somewhat of an indication for Wales, but like that's not ultimately going to matter all that much. It's just a matter of who shows up on the day between these two teams because they are very, very familiar with each other at this point. On the other side, PSG versus BDS. BDS dropping that early series to Team Wales, but then rebounding since. They haven't lost a game since. Granted, against weaker opponents, quote unquote. But my eyes aren't on BDS to win this game. I think BDS are clearly going to be the heavy favorites. The question becomes, has PSG ever shown the ability to beat the top major regions internationally? What have their prior Worlds results been? What have their prior MSI results been? We'll start with MSI last year, of which it's important to note they're facing against the top 2 teams in Europe, whereas BDS is the 4th best team. So that is important context to keep in mind. But when you're looking at MSI's results, yeah, they got 2-0'd by G2 and 3-0'd by Golden Guardians. So that doesn't really instill the most amount of confidence. Last year, you go to Worlds and Beyond Gaming was the 2 seed out of the PCS. They bombed out in Playins stage. The number 1 seed in Flying Oysters were able to take a game off of 100 Thieves. Ugh, still shuddering thinking about that. But beyond that, they weren't able to do much. But given their group had Gen G and RNG. So yeah, not really anything to be upset about. Now, how do they win this series? How do I build out a game plan for them? Adam has kind of seen a regression over the last few days. He went from being one of the best players in Playins stage to kind of taking a step back and running it down at times and having some questionable moments. And I think you can rely on that to happen again in this series. So if I'm jungle for PCS, I'm not going top lane. I'm focusing on bot lane and getting ahead there because Crowny is the exact opposite. He's been ramping up as the tournament has gone on. So if you shut Crowny down, get him behind, and allow Adam to make these mistakes on his own that he's already been doing, and your top laner can already nullify him, I think you're fine because I'm not too worried about the mid lane of BDS. Nuke's been decent, but he hasn't been great, and I think PSG should be able to take advantage of that, hopefully. But it's just a matter of whether you can execute on your game plans. You know BDS is going to draft team fight. And honestly, I've seen enough to know that teams can out team fight them. So I think you draft the better team fight comp and just make sure you hold on and you can win. So my final predictions, and I am going to go BDS 3-1, despite wanting one Team Wales, wanting PSG to pull off the upset, just because I want to have that conversation about 4 seeds that they shouldn't be at the tournament, at least for North America and Europe. But we'll once again, we will deal with that if we get there. But if BDS wins this, then hey, it is what it is. Now, as a North American fan, the reason why these matchups are important is because NRG is going to potentially be facing one of these 2 teams. Because NRG is a Pool 1 seed, they will face off against either Damwon Kia, Weibo, or one of these 2 play-in seeds. And all it is just a matter of luck of the draw at that point of whether we can get one of the 2 bottom feeders. Now, it's a 25% chance. So anything is possible, and getting that first early win could be massive for us. Now, granted, the next stage would face us against all the other 1-0 teams, which you're assuming are going to be better, but at least gives you like 1 game to kind of ramp up into things before you obviously have to deal with the LPL or LCK. And hell, say we win and say Damwon Kia and Weibo win theirs, there's a chance that we could face another Pool 4 team in round 2. It's just all luck of the draw, which is why I'm so excited for tomorrow. And it also kind of sucks because I have to teach golf tomorrow, so I'm not sure how I'm going to do my reaction to the Swiss draw, if I'm going to have to wait until I get home later. But yeah, I started teaching at 9, and I think these best of 5 series probably won't get done until 8, so there's going to be no way for me to like record my raw reaction there. 2 final things to touch on here with North America before I wrap this one up. First is NRG's hype video that came out yesterday. If you have not seen it, please go watch it. They still haven't announced their world jersey. That'll be the second thing that we talk about. But I've been really impressed with NRG's YouTube content for a budding org. Like, they're hitting consistent 5-figure viewership on their videos, and they have less than 3,000 subscribers on YouTube, which is amazing. I was happy whenever NRG came into the league because I knew their content was going to be the thing that carried them in the first place. And once again, that is happening. So I'm very, very thrilled with how it's going. You go on Reddit though, and some people are like, oh, people aren't watching this. It's like, no, that's a fair amount of viewership for how many people watch LCS content nowadays, especially for a new and rising org within the space. I don't think it's this massive deal that people are making out to be. I mean, shit, I've got what, almost 1.5k subscribers, and I barely crack 100 views on each video. Granted, mine's a little bit more analytical and different style than theirs. They obviously have a much better production quality, and I wish I could do things at the level that they do, but I just cannot. But yeah, I've been really impressed by the content that they're putting out, the content that Cloud9 has been putting out. Both of them have been handling this Worlds pretty well. Team Liquid has been pretty on top of it as well. Golden Guardians, I mean, they're kind of out now, which, speaking of that, if you follow me on Twitter or watch any of my shorts on social media, you probably know that Golden Guardians released their Worlds jersey yesterday for pre-orders, despite being out of the tournament for 4 days now. And I still think it's ridiculous. There's no world where you should ever have a Worlds jersey that gets released after you are eliminated from the tournament. I know one of their people has come out and said, you know, this is to commemorate the year that was. It's like, yeah, but the year that was is now tainted heavily by how you ended it. That's the nature of North American tournaments. That's why I preach so hard to get this stuff out in the hands of fans before games begin, to start developing some pride, because I don't know what to tell you here. This goes back to Loud, and I wanted to touch on this earlier, but it's like CB LOL, for example, they never make it all that far in these tournaments. They didn't this year either. And yet still, they're carrying viewership better than the LCS, and they're carrying pride better than we have to a certain extent. But they don't have results, which is important to note. We're getting to that stage as well, especially with teams like Golden Guardians and our 4 seeds, where it's like, okay, you're just not getting the results anymore. So you need to do things that instill pride in people prior to that, to still make it an enjoyable time despite the loss. And one of those is making sure that you get your apparel and things that your fans can represent you with out in time. Now, I did receive 2 DMs about this, one of which I think is important to disclose to you all. You'll see in the replies here, this person said that I have much to learn. They do merchandising at Riot and used to work for Cloud9. Now, I'm going to have a conversation with them privately. I will obviously share as much as I can here to try and help teach you all and like give you some examples into what he's saying of why this may or may not be possible, because clearly in response to mine, that like they're saying that it's not. But my question is going to be, if lead times are so long in advance that you can't plan 2 months, like 2 or 3 months to have a World's jersey, or even if you start prepping it by the beginning of the summer split, like what are we doing? Do we need to change vendors? Do we need, like, what needs to happen here? Because that's ridiculous. Also, I think there should be some risk involved in this. I think teams should be setting aside 2,000 to 3,000, or maybe even a little bit more, in risk costs of like, okay, we have this set aside for the World's jersey if it happens. If it doesn't happen, then sure, we eat that cost, but that's the nature of operating the business. Like, I'm just so sick and tired of teams feeling like we don't put pride over everything. And also, I am going to talk to him because he works for Riot. Why Riot doesn't put out LCS Worlds merch? Because they're the ones, if anything, that like you can create designs and a bunch of other stuff way in advance. You can create a thematic that you want for your region for Worlds, and teams could base World jerseys around it if they want. But also, you can just have like a Worlds line that hopefully, you know, you can swap out some of the logos really quick before they go to press and before they go like start printing and making everything. Like, I don't get why that's not possible. Or, for example, you do like a varsity jacket that has like stitch on things, that like the stitch on is the final part that they can just save and replace whichever teams they want later. I'm just trying to think of different ways that you can make sure that you get better LCS pride than what it feels like we get now. We had 2 months prior to Worlds this year, and there's no reason why we shouldn't have more from our teams and from our league to be able to represent them on the world stage. I am so happy that I have stuff like this, and I'm telling you, if you had something like this for the LCS, people would buy it too, because we want to rep our region, we want to rep our teams, and it feels like there's very little chance to do that outside of just watching the games and dropping a like on a video, which is not the same as tangibly owning something that you can show your pride with. Anyways, if you have any questions that you want me to ask him, or anything you are curious about, please drop them in the comments down below, and I'll be sure to ask them in my conversation whenever I have it. So that's it for me. That's the last video before North America officially kicks off this tournament, which starts technically tomorrow with the group or the Swiss draw. I am beyond excited for this stage. It is my favorite part of the year. Swiss is going to be much better than groups, and I promise you will come to learn that as time goes on. But yeah, it feels like the dawning of the official start of the tournament. Thursday will be our first match, so we're still a few days away, but damn, does it feel a little nerve-wracking. Hopefully somebody can finally do something, but we'll see. If not, yeah, we'll all be here to cope, right? Anyways, catch you on the next one. Adios.